Welcome to Movie Rehash. Today, I'm going to explain a thriller movie from 2017 called Infidelity in Suburbia. Before starting the film, make sure to like and subscribe my channel for more interesting movie recaps. The film starts with a couple making out enthusiastically. As the man throws the female on the mattress, they're interrupted by woman's son. The boy indicates them a dead mouse and smiles. Then the lady begins shouting. After this, we see a boatyard in which a family of 3 is setting up their boat. The lady named Laura discusses redesigning her kitchen, but her husband does not seem to support her thoughts. She then asks her son to be careful while using knife. The husband then receives a call and leaves from there. After that, we see another man who is looking at Laura. She is strolling with her stuff and slips, almost falling, but the guy saves her, falling down. When the man leaves, Laura's husband comes and hands her a newspaper. Meanwhile, his son, Jamie, falls into the water. The same guy comes to rescue Jamie, and takes him to his parents. The man presents himself as Elliot and the parents thank him for his help. The couple then invites him for a family dinner, where Laura talks about Elliot with her dearest companion Mira. Mira seems to be curious by his appearance. They then, at that point, welcome him into the house to serve him dinner. He appreciates one of Laura's works of art without limit. She then says that she used to sell, but Greg transformed her studio into a workplace. In the midst of this, Greg is on the cell phone with his secretary, Hannah, and appears to be flirting with her. The following day, while Laura is running with Mira, the two discuss about handsome Elliot. As she gets home, she sees Elliot, standing shirtless in the yard. Mira goes to near him and he explains the renovation. Laura cannot take her eye off his body. She runs upstairs to take a shower. As she is taking shower, Elliot quietly passes before the room. After that, Laura goes to market to get some vegetable, and Elliot jumps behind her. He compliments her choice of design and then offers her a surprise. He then tells her to close her eyes, and makes her taste a delicious cannoli and a sip of juice. They are once again at Laura's home. Mira gets there and sees Elliot working shirtless. She is also interested by him, and starts inquiring him questions regarding his girlfriends, and his living. He then tells her that he does not have girlfriends but has eye on someone. In the next scene, we see Laura questioning Greg about last night activity. She asks where he was last night. He tells her that he was at work, but actually he was with his secretary, Hannah. Greg then comes close to her but she pushes him away. The following morning, Elliot arrives at Laura's residence with the stuff for the renovation. Laura returns from the run and finds Jamie talking with Elliot. Laura then requests him to join Mira and Charlie while she goes to take a shower. Elliot follows her to the bathroom and gets in the shower room where they ends up having sex there. In the following scene, Laura is at the boatyard where she sees different couples hugging each other. She then gets on her boat and talks to her husband. The husband tells her that how modern teenagers sneak onto other boat in search of romantic adventures. Laura then tells him that she has found purple underwear, and Greg says that it might be a teenage girl. Laura is in surprise when Greg hugs her and confesses his love. Meanwhile, Elliot is playing with Jamie in the yard. Laura arrives there, and asks Jamie to play with Charlie. She then takes Elliot with her and tells him that they must stop what they are doing. Instead of paying attention to her, he starts seducing her, and she tries to stop, but they ends up having sex again. We then see Elliot sitting in his boat, where he begins removing Greg's face from Laura's photos. Being incredibly dreadful, he replaces his face in the photos. The next day, he goes to meet Laura and gives her a rose for her birthday, saying he knows everything about her. Then Laura's husband gets there and sees yellow rose. He becomes surprised as it was Laura's favorite rose. After that he leaves. Then Elliot comes into Laura's residence, and she chides him for doing what he did with her. She also tells him that she cannot do it again. She then asks him to leave the house because she no longer wants him to work there. Hearing this, Elliot becomes sad, and leaves from there. She then goes to Jamie and informs him that there is no Elliot any longer. But further on, we see that Elliot is still in yard stalking Laura. Then Laura dressed up and goes outside, and sees group of people, surprising her with a birthday party. She thanks everybody and kisses her husband. At the same time, Hannah comes there, and tells Laura that how excited Greg was to arrange all this. Then Greg takes Elliot and introduces him to Hannah, and she starts to look at him seductively. He pardons himself, however the woman follows him. Hannah tries to talk to him, but he barely answers her, and continues to look at Laura. After the party, Laura is with her husband and decides to tell what she did with Elliot. Greg anyway stops her and states that she is astounding. And they both ends up having romance. On the other side, Elliot takes Hannah on the boat and Hannah throws herself onto him. However, she knows that he is not interested on her. She becomes bored and when she starts to leave from there, she finds Laura's pictures on the wall. He starts calling Elliot things and he strangles her from behind. The following morning, Laura is watering the plants when Greg comes and says kind words to her. He tells her that after the trip, he will spend more time with her and then kisses her. Elliot is also watching all this and becomes jealous. Laura then goes to the work shed and figures out that it has been transformed into a studio. She finds canvases all around. But on every canvas, Elliot and Laura forever is written. Laura is bewildered by the whole thing and then she hears Jamie scream. She finds him in the yard, and he tells her that Elliot was here. Laura quickly runs outside and meets Elliot. She tells him to leave her alone and not shock her again. His persistent obsession turns into aggressive behavior. He then hugs her, Laura starts screaming, and Jamie sees all this. Seeing her son there, Elliot releases Laura and leaves the house. That evening, Laura checks Elliot's website and reads the reviews of his work. She finds a disturbing comment from a purple wallflower that Elliot destroyed her life. The next morning, Laura immediately leaves for Denton Island and goes to a shop. She talks to the owner and asks for a purple wallflower. The shopkeeper tells her about a woman named Willie Hamill. The man gives her the location and Laura goes to the lady's home. After talking to her, the lady tells her that she lost everything due to Elliot, her marriage, and family. She also reveals that Elliot is a totally mad person. In the following scene, Hannah's body is found in the water. Mira and Bill watch the news about this on television, and they try to call Greg. When Greg is about to receive the call, Elliot appears from behind and the scene fades out. Laura then awakens from her sleep and she looks very frightened and restless. She goes downstairs with a baseball bat and keeps hearing something break in the house. She heads to the kitchen and finds same cannoli that Elliot once made her taste. Then she finds a completely broken window frame. In the next scene, we are shown Greg, who is tied up with a pole in the boat. Somehow he manages to escape and tries to run from there, but Elliot beats him. At the same time, Laura talks to Mira and expresses her suspicion about Greg's vanishing. She then tells Mira that she engaged in extramarital relations with Elliot, and presently Elliot is completely fixated on her. Laura then goes to the bread shop, and talks with the elderly person at the counter. There she sees a wall of memory with photo placements. The elderly person there talks about Elliot, and how he used to come there with his mom since he was a child. Sadly, his mom never had a dedicated husband, and this significantly affected Elliot and makes him a man he is today. But the things get even worse when the whole house caught fire. After hearing the story, Laura gets even more frightened and immediately stood up. When she about to leave, the old woman says that Elliot will come in the morning, and also says that he is going to marry a widow, and become a stepfather. She quickly runs home, and finds Elliot, waiting for her. Laura asks about Greg's whereabouts, but he starts getting physical and starts physically abusing her. He brutalizes her. Jamie comes there but he sends him back. Then he drags Laura to the bedroom. He ties Laura up but she manages to get free. She then confesses her love for Elliot and tells him she has now realized how much she actually loves him. Elliot then completely unties her and both of them go downstairs to have dinner. Jamie is tied downstairs, but Laura still asks him to eat and play along. This is when Mira and Bill get there, and Laura tries to walk toward the window. Elliot finds out just in time and forces both son and mother to go upstairs to the bedroom with him. Elliot picks up Jamie, and lets him go outside so that he can have some private time with Laura. Laura tries to get away, but he grabs her on the bed and starts to rape her. Just as he gets on top of Laura, Jamie enters the room. This is when Elliot gets the same flashback from his own childhood. He phases out and Laura, making good use of the opportunity, hits him and escapes. Laura then makes Jamie run for his life, and in the meantime, Elliot wakes up. He then terrorizes Laura. He throws her to the floor and hits her with a hammer on the head. In the next scene, we see him carrying a body in a sack to the boat. Laura instantly cuts the sack with a knife and escapes. There she comes face to face with Elliot. She stabs him and runs away. Then she follows a blood trail and finds Greg unconscious. She calls the Coast Guard for help, but it does not connect. Elliot on the other hand springs up again and Laura hits him. She tries to run away but Elliot chases after her. He catches her in a room upstairs. Luckily, the room has a window, and she pushes him out of that window. Crashing down, Elliot hits his head and dies. In the final scene, we see Laura's family together, and happy. Surprisingly, she opens the fridge and finds that there is delicious cannoli inside. Greg brought it. This is where the movie ends.